Just as senior management owns and is responsible for the assets of the organization, so does management also own the total set of risks these assets are exposed to. Senior management determines what is an acceptable level of risk for the organization. As security practitioners, we must aim to maintain the levels of risk within the limits of risk tolerance of management. This is where many organizations can have different levels of risk tolerance, and even within an organization, different departments may have a different attitude regarding what is an acceptable or unacceptable risk. The security practitioner seeks to provide an adequate level of security to meet the expectations of management. First, security commensurate with the risk and magnitude of harm resulting from the loss, misuse, or unauthorized access to or modification of information. Adequate security is provided through the use of security controls. These are selected or enhanced in the next phase of risk management, based on the results of this risk assessment as documented in the risk assessment report. Controls are justified by risk and should be traceable to the risk they are designed to mitigate. Controls are defined as follows. Second, the management, operational, and technical controls, for example, safeguards or countermeasures, prescribed for an information system to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the system and its information. The implementation of controls should reduce risk, hopefully to an acceptable level. The implementation of controls leads to residual risk, which is defined as follows. Finally, residual risk is the portion of risk remaining after security measures have been applied. Risk assessment is the next step in the cyclical view of risk management. Depending upon which published framework, standard, process, or handbook approach you're using, you may need to break the assessment task down into several steps or do them all as one larger process. Regardless, you'll start with the organization's strategic, tactical, and operational plans, covering the long-term, near-term, and day-to-day, respectively, as a time frame in which to see priorities, goals, and objectives. Then, you'll work through a process to identify different possible risks, characterize them, and then estimate their potential for disrupting the organization. Risk assessment is defined as the process of identifying, estimating, and prioritizing risks to organizational operations, including mission, functions, image, reputation, as well as organizational assets, individuals, other organizations, and the nation, resulting from the operation of an information system. Part of risk management incorporates threat and vulnerability analyses and considers mitigations provided by security controls, planned or in place. It is synonymous with risk analysis. Here we have some of the definitions commonly used in risk management. A threat is any circumstance or event with the potential to adversely impact organizational operations, including mission, functions, image, or reputation, organizational assets, individuals, other organizations, or the nation through an information system via unauthorized access, destruction, disclosure, or modification of information and/or denial of service. Weakness in an information system, system security procedures, internal controls, or implementation that could be exploited by a threat source are defined as vulnerability. Impact is the magnitude of harm that can be expected to result from the consequences of unauthorized disclosure of information, unauthorized modification of information, unauthorized destruction of information, or loss of information or information system availability. Likelihood of occurrence, a weighted factor based on a subjective analysis or the probability that a given threat or set of threats is capable of exploiting a given vulnerability or set of vulnerabilities. In risk management terms, hazards are the conditions which can result in accidents. Acts of nature, such as weather or earthquakes, are not threats. They are best viewed as risk conditions, which may result in hazards to the organization, its operations, assets, and people. Managing hazards requires two broad categories of skills and activities. First, occupational safety and health, principally focusing on reducing or eliminating the causes and opportunities for injury or property damage. Second, security and protection of the infrastructures and facilities that support and enable the information and communication services the organization depends on. The first set are beyond the normal scope of the SSCP's domains of knowledge or job responsibilities. The second, of course, are essential to overall information security. This figure from NIST Special Publication 800-30 outlines the risk assessment process. This diagram shows the process of a risk event and the relationship between the various elements of a risk event. For example, a threat source, a malicious actor, uses a piece of malware, a threat event, to exploit a vulnerability in a software product, an unpatched system, that is unpatched because of a poor patch management process, a predisposing condition, causing damage, an adverse impact to the organization. The result of the risk assessment process is often documented as a report or presentation to management for their use in prioritizing the identified risks. This report is provided to management for review and approval. In some cases, management may indicate a need for a more in-depth or detailed risk assessment. The broad strategic use of the cyclic risk management model would seek to identify as many high-priority risks may be facing the organization in the immediate and near term, and then report out on the assessment of them in a single report. This can be done on a periodic basis and is quite useful for larger, more complex organizations. It's also prudent to use a risk assessment process to report on an ad hoc basis, particularly when a risk that just pops up unexpectedly seems to need urgent attention. In most cases, management will provide the direction to proceed with using the findings of the risk assessment process, along with other inputs as they see fit, as the basis for proceeding with a prioritized set of risk response actions. Note that threat events are not accidents. Threats have intent. They act to achieve a purpose or goal, which means by definition, threats are humans acting singly or in organized ways to achieve a set of objectives. As with any human endeavor, the threat actor's purpose may change and evolve over time, especially as they learn more about their prospective targets. This third set of activities in the cyclic view of risk management is where decisions are made on what is the best action to take in regard to the risk identified in and prioritized through the risk assessment process. The decisions made are dependent on the attitude of management toward risk and the availability and cost of risk mitigation. The options commonly used to respond to risk are to accept the risk, avoid the risk, to reduce or mitigate the risk, or transfer or share the risk. Each of these options for risk response will be examined in more detail later in the course.